Okay. Well, it's 3:30, so I think we'll go ahead and get started because I know I've seen the presentation and there's a lot happening, a lot going on, a lot to share. And so I'd like to introduce you all to Dr. Nicole Andrews. We're thrilled to have her here today. She was one of the adjudicators for our COE's music festival, for the Vocal Music Festival. It was a great experience. And I also was familiar with working with her out in Palm Springs Unified School District with our choir director. So she's very talented, very experienced. She's coming to us from University of Redlands. And when she mentioned this idea about body mapping in an email, it caught my attention. I thought, well, this is interesting. Let's explore this a little bit. So take it away.
Well, thank you so much. It's so great to see you here. I know we're all teachers, and it drives us crazy when students don't have their cameras on. But I am going to ask you if you are willing to put your camera on. And the reason being that this is a somatic workshop, so it's really going to be all about me watching you movement and your movement, pardon me, and giving you feedback. So if you're willing, I would really appreciate it. It's really hard for me to monitor the chat and share the PowerPoint and watch you on the screen. So if you do have a question, I encourage you to just unmute and ask the question, and I'll do my best to answer you. It's great to see some familiar faces and some graduates. Hey, Matt, great to see you. So I'm just gonna jump right in and share my screen. Let me see, desktop 2. Before we start, I do want to share with you that though I am Director of Choral Studies at the University of Redlands, my undergraduate degree was in oboe performance. So I'm a trained instrumentalist. I did a conjoint degree with oboe performance and music education, and then I did my master's and my doctorate in choral conducting. So we're going to visit here today with places of balance, which is really important as a conductor. Can you just wave your hand at me if you're currently conducting in some format? Great. And anyone still performing? Sometimes one kind of goes by the wayside. Oh, great, we're all still performing. Excellent. So I'm talking about the places of balance because it's not only important as a performer, but it's also important as a conductor. So I'm just going to jump in. I have more information than an hour, so I may speed through some stuff. I may slow down for some other things, but hopefully if you have any questions, we can just stop and answer them. So the first thing is, if you are experiencing pain, we please ask, as a body mapper, it's a licensed organization, the Association of Body Mapping Educators, we ask that you do see a physician. So the majority of body mapping educators do have their doctorates, but it's in music. So if you are experiencing pain, please see a medical physician. First question everybody asks, what is body mapping? Really, it's the conscious correction of your internal self-representation. So what that means is the way you perceive and map your body or draw your body is the way your body is. So for example, if we don't map or know that we have a joint here, our elbow, which we all know because it's obvious, then we don't use it, or we don't use it correctly. But we all know that the elbow is there because we can see it. It's a hinge joint. We know how to use it. We may not be using it correctly, but we know it's there. So what we want to do as body mappers, I should put on the side that body mappers are all trained professional musicians. So it's not, a physical therapist who knows nothing about music who's helping you. It's a trained musician, professionally trained musician who is learning anatomy and somatic education to help performers. So what we want to do is we want to help you move well and avoid injury. So any of you on the screen who have experienced injury, whether that be bursitis or tendonitis or any of the multifunctional overuse, which we get very frequently as musicians, the goal of body mapping or Alexander technique or Feldenkrais or all of these somatic educations is to help you understand your anatomy, to work with it, as opposed to knowing nothing about it and working against it. So really what we're doing is actively cooperating with our anatomy. Now, by a show of hands, because I can see you all, which is so great, how many of you, as part of your music education degree or your music degree, were taught anatomy? By a show of hands. 2 of you. All right. Detailed anatomy or just a little bit of anatomy? Go ahead and unmute.
Detailed.
Detailed. Wonderful. Matt, you had your hand up. How about you? Detailed?
I mean, I've been to your body mapping stuff before at U.
Okay. So all right. So a little bit. Yeah. Great. So our goal as body mapping educators is to incorporate this into the curriculum at the college level so that when people are learning to become teachers, they become somatically aware. And then when they go to teach, they're teaching it from a young age to young children. Hence body mapping educators. So how do we balance? I get asked two questions very frequently. And the first is, how do I stand? And the answer to that is according to your actual bony structure, which you can see here in the picture. So I like to call this guy Bony Bob. And your work, the points of balance, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Can you see my mouse moving? Yeah, great. So these are the points of balance that we're going to talk about today. And then the next question I get is, how do I sit? Mostly, how do I stand comes from choral singers or soloists, and how do I sit generally comes from your band and your orchestral musicians. How do you sit? By using the weight delivery capacity of the skeleton or the bony structure. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to skim the surface. Normally when you do a body mapping workshop, it's a 2-day intensive, 6 to 8 hours a day. We're playing, we're moving, we're understanding, but COVID will not allow. So we're going to jam pack and skim the top with an hour's worth of material. We're going to look at the bony structure, not necessarily the soft tissue or the muscle tone or any of those kinds of things, just the bony structure today. So I'm going to ask you to become aware of your current posture. No judgment, just awareness. And when I ask you that, what do you do? Go ahead and unmute and share with me what you did as soon as I asked you.
Sat up straighter.
Sat up straighter, okay. Anybody else?
I knew this was coming. I don't know why, but I did. But I automatically adjusted myself in my seat. I pushed my chair back, so I'm like literally sitting on the edge of my seat so I can be straighter.
Okay, great. Anyone else want to share?
I sat up straight.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in?
Oh God.
So we're hearing, yeah, you're back. So we're hearing sit up straight. That's where we're going to. And that's what we're told as young musicians, right? Sit on the edge of the chair, feet flat on the floor, shoulders back, up straight, sit up straight. All right. Instead of posture, let's start using the word balance, because posture tends to come with a fixed position. And we don't want a fixed position because as musicians, we are never in a fixed position. As long as we're breathing, we're moving. So let's try these out for size. I'm going to ask you to stand up with me. So great if I can see you. If I can't see you, totally fine as well. And you're going to try on these postures. Now, I'm going to really exaggerate them. You can do the same. Please don't hurt yourself, but we're going to check these out. So we have that sway back. So in a sway back, we're looking at shoulders are coming back, pelvis is coming forward, right? Knees, thighs are coming forward. You're going to notice that there's pressure in your toes, perhaps pressure off your ankles. Now we're going to try the other, lumbar. So the lumbar is what you refer to as your lower back. So that's that kind of butt up, knees locked, shoulders down and back. So you see this very common in choral students, partially because of the outfits they have to wear, but also because they're told to stand up straight and show their presence bone, okay? Then your thoracic spine is right here by your rib cage. Let's hunch that over. You're going to notice, I want you to start to become aware of what the rest of your body is doing in response to one part of your body moving. So if you think your thoracic spine is curved, what's happening to your toes or your knees or your jaw? Or what about the head forward? This one we see when people are up on the back risers or when people are going to their instrument as opposed to bringing their instrument to themselves. So that head forward feeling. What happens to, let's say, your glutes or your butt when your head goes forward or your shoulders? So we need to become really aware of how the body responds. So the last one you see there, the fifth one, is good posture. And instead of posture, let's think balance. And when I point out these 6 balance points to you today, I think that may help a little bit. So you see, and feel free to stand, move around, whatever it is that you want to do during this workshop. So here's that plumb line here of good posture. Okay. All right, so let's go forward. So balance is a state of equality, and the equality is in the amount, the weight, and the value and importance. Many people think equality is simply weight, but it's not the case. Nothing is more important than anything else. So many times you'll hear singers say, I only need to worry about the breath, but my feet don't matter, or my arms don't matter. And you'll hear pianists say, my breath doesn't matter, it's only about my fingers or my arms. And that's not the case, because the body is one, including the mind, but we don't have time to get into that today, okay? So we really have to focus on the whole body. All right, so within our place of balance, we always want to have buoyancy, We want to have springiness. This is as animated as I'm going to get here with you today. And we want to have floating. All right. So those are the three things. Now, I don't know about you, but so many times I have seen or played or sung, in most cases under these conductors as opposed to with these conductors. And those two words make a big difference. All right. But that's a whole other workshop in and of itself. So many times I have played under conductors who will say, why are you playing so heavy? What's going on? Why are you subdividing or slowing down, right? All of these things. Or how come why are you slowing down? You see this all the time. And realistically, it's never the ensemble's fault. It's always the conductor. So we have to reflect back on ourselves. So why am I saying this? Well, because if you're hearing an ensemble play flat or play sharp, chances are it's something in your body map. I mean, there's the given that they didn't tune in the first place, right? Or they don't know the right note. I'm talking like baseline here. So everybody knows the right notes and they know how to tune their instrument. Why are they playing under supported? Well, it could be because of your ankles. It could be because of your pelvis. Like, who knows? We need to get in and get to the nitty gritty as to why this is happening. So we always want to have springy, floating buoyancy as a conductor. All right, we need to have a state of equilibrium, which means an equal distribution of weight. And we want to avoid the use of muscles when we're in a standing position. So what does that mean? Well, if we're using our muscles to help us stand, the muscles are not available to help us move. That's it. So when we stand and we lock our knees, suddenly our legs are engaged, our glutes are engaged, our stomach is engaged, and therefore they're not free to help movement while we conduct. Same goes for arms. So we're going to visit 6 places of balance today. The first right here is our AO joint. The next is our arm structure, followed by our lumbar spine, our hip joints, our knees, and our ankles. So normally when we do a workshop, we call these the 6 hours or the 6 places of balance. So we'll spend an hour and a half working through the AO joint. But today, what a cute cat. Today, I have a dog, so they may appear, just so you know. Today, we're going to, again, skim that surface a couple of minutes instead. Okay.
Our goal is an accurate
Can you hear
body
it?
map for you so that you may enjoy its benefits. Later, we will talk about how you can correct it if it needs correcting. For the moment, just ask yourself the questions. How do I think of my head and spine? Does my conception differ from what I see on the screen? If you find your conception differs, that it is mistaken, then you can begin to use the images to correct your body map in your brain. As your map is corrected, your movement will improve.
So this is the thing. The way we perceive, the way we map, right, internally is accurate. So the map always prevails. If we don't think there's a joint there, we're not going to use it. Okay, so our first place we're going to visit is called our AO joint, or our atlanto-occipital joint. And I'm going to ask you to palpate. What that means is you're going to poke or massage where you have mapped your AO joint. Your AO joint is the place where your skull meets your spine. Go ahead, give yourself a nice massage and palpate where you have mapped that space. I'm not going to do it because then I'll give it away. Can you see me while I'm talking too, as well as my PowerPoint? Okay, great. All right, so I see a lot of spaces, some from here, some up a little further. All right, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you. This is the spine of someone who's about my height, so about 5'9", okay, give you an idea. And here we have a skull. This is the cool thing about body mapping, it's very concrete. So we actually have, this is not a real skull, it's fake, but it's the right size. So the AO joint, imagine I cracked off the bottom of the skull here, and that's what this part is. The AO joint is the place where the skull meets your top vertebrae, yeah? So we have a little divot and we have a little bump, and that's like a rocking motion. We don't have these hooks, that's just so I can hang my spine up. That's not in your body. All right, so that's that rocking motion, and you can see right here, oh, right here, those little divots, those bumps right here, okay? That hole is so that our spinal cord can go up into our head. So here we have the bumps, and here we have the rockers where the bumps go in. So this is the top vertebrae, this is the bottom of the skull. So how do we find that? Well, it's equal distance from the front to the back, it's equal distance from the side to the side. So the atlas is the top of the spine, and the occiput is the bottom of the skull. So if you all go ahead and put your fingers in front of your ears and put your hands underneath your nose like you're holding up your nose, and then go ahead and flip the other one backwards like this, so you're creating like a diamond. Your AO joint is right in the middle of that space. Is this higher than anybody had mapped? Or is it the right place where everybody had mapped? Higher for some of you? Okay, so another way that we can find it, go ahead and hook your thumbnail behind your teeth, and then you're gonna go up into this groove right here. So if I were to take my hair and my skin off, I'm talking about up here in the back of your head. And instead of nodding yes, you're gonna actually use your thumb to rock that yes motion. And you're gonna notice that that nod, that yes motion seems much higher. Can you feel that? That's a much higher space. There's your AO joint. The best way for you to find it, any singers in the group? Raise your hand if you're a singer. A few? Okay. We always say, raise the soft palate, soft palate. Nobody knows what they're talking about when you say soft palate. Okay, so the soft palate, the way to find it is if you run your tongue from the, I can't do it at the same time. Oh, here, I'll take this. So you're gonna put your tongue behind your teeth, and this is your hard palate, and you're gonna run your tongue here. And then when you get to the soft gushy part where your uvula is hanging down, you know what I'm talking about? So it goes up in the back. That's your AO joint. All the way up there. So it's much higher than what we perceive. So how does this affect us? Well, what we do is we map that yes motion in the same place as the no motion. Have you all thought that that's in the same place? Those are two different places by about 6 or 7 vertebrae. So the yes motion is much higher. So if we're conducting and our yes motion is here in our brain, we've mapped it here, we've now locked our jaw because none of this has any freedom or movement. So we really want to get that AO joint free. Go ahead and bobblehead. Did anybody notice release in their shoulders, finding the AO joint in the right place? Yeah, you're all saying yes. It's just because you're bobbleheading. But did anybody, thumbs up, did you find release? Good. Anybody find a little more release in the jaw with finding the AO joint? Yeah, that's huge for double tonguing, triple tonguing, or just articulation in general. Okay, so equidistance front and back, equidistance right and left. Now, disclaimer, this is for a fully functional, normal human skeleton. There's always exceptions, right? Some people are born without limbs. Some people are born where one side of their body is a different size than the others. There are many issues, but for your average skeletal structure, it's equally balanced. Some people will ask, well, how can that be balanced when you look at the size of the skull in the front and the size of the skull in the back? That makes no sense, right? Well, the mandible, this is what we call the mandible here, the weight of this mandible is counter to the weight of the brain. The majority of the brain is in the back. So then we get that even weight. Okay, so the AO joint, check it out. It's all the way up in here. It's not down here, where many of us map our jaw, or even here. It's all the way up. And all these muscles, if we don't map the AO joint in the right place, we have to use these muscles to hold our head up because the bony structure can no longer do it. So we want to have freedom here. And as musicians, we always say, oh, my shoulders. Or as people who use computers or people who use cell phones, my shoulders, my shoulders. But really, it's finding that balance in the AO joint. We're also, as a society, afraid to have double chins. Don't be afraid. Embrace the space you take up. Because if you have that double chin, your AO joint is in the right place. You'll see people do this to avoid the double chin, right, for the selfie. Your AO joint is way off kilter now, and you're going to start pulling your shoulders back and engaging muscles, which we don't want. It's like a teeter-totter or a seesaw. If I were to scare you right now and go, bah, you would have what we call a startle reflex, right? When we do that, we actually shorten the muscles in the back of our neck. And many of us are in that space all the time, whether it's through looking at a computer screen or sitting in a chair trying to conduct and hit a music stand with a baton, which you should never do, by the way. So we want to get out of this space of shortening the muscles, because when we go to stand up straight, what do? We keep our AO joint off kilter according to the shortness of the back of these muscles. So we don't want to stretch the neck. We just want to find that AO joint. All right. Okay. A head that is off balance. Anyone know the average weight of a human head? Matt, don't answer this if you remember from the workshop. Go ahead and unmute.
18 pounds.
15, okay, anyone else? We could like place bets here. Everyone's trying to remember Jerry Maguire. Am I dating myself if I say that? Okay, we have a quiet group here today. The average weight of the human head, drum roll, is 10 to 12 pounds. So that's 2 bags of flour, 2 bags of sugar. When you think of that, it's actually quite heavy. That's the average weight. So I'm going to show you right here. This is a medicine ball, which is 12 pounds. I think it's 12 pounds. 12 pounds. So if I use my bony structure, which is my ulna, my radius in my forearm, to hold this up, I can actually move this medicine ball around pretty easily. But I'm going to keep talking as I take away the balance from my bony structure and use my muscles. And you're going to notice a big difference in my voice when I do that. Can you hear the difference in my voice? Because I have to use my muscles to hold my head up. The only way for me to keep this from falling right now is to clench my stomach, right? So I could be exaggerating, but I'm honestly not, because this is 12 pounds of weight that I have to make sure I keep standing up straight. So think of a musician whose head is off balance and suddenly they're clenching their stomach and they have to breathe. They suddenly can no longer breathe. So we really want to find balance in those AO joints, regardless if you're a wind player or not. We need that freedom there. The body will always compensate. The map will always prevail. So what happens when a head is off balance? When our chin comes forward? If our chin comes forward, what has to happen? Go ahead and try it with me. Your shoulder blades pull back, because otherwise you're going to tip over. So just naturally, you're going to compensate. You're going to have strain on your lower back. So we always hear people say, oh, my lower back is so bad. The root of the problem may not be the lower back. Your pelvis is going to come forward. You may have to lock your knees because, again, you have to keep yourself from tipping over. You're going to have pressure on your ankles. All kinds of horrible things are going to happen. This is one of my favorite slides in the world. So how many of you have one of these? These demonic little things, right? This is a cell phone. So this connects us to the world. And if you go ahead and pull out your cell phone, put it in your hand as though you're going to answer a text. And be aware of your body. Oh, you're all like, oh, I have a beautiful AO joint now. But do what you would have done 15 minutes ago, right? So if you look at that phone, the majority of us do this and look down at that phone. Here we go. If you're doing this, the weight of your head is now 60 pounds. And your bony structure cannot keep that up because you can see right here, there's no way to put that balance point down there. So what happens? You have to use your muscles. So now we're engaging all of our muscles in our shoulders and our necks to keep our head from falling off, essentially. Now we go deeper, right? There's soft tissue, there's connective tissue, there's all kinds of things. We don't have time to do that today. But we do not want these shoulders engaged, helping us stand up, because then they're not there to help us move. You with me still? I know I'm going super fast, but I appreciate that you're here with me and trying to stay focused. This is a person who understands their AO joint. Check this out. He's about to drop a brick. Watch what happens when he drops the brick. He can just get out of the way without even tipping over. He balances it once again. Equal distribution, equal amount, equal weight. I think he gets up to 22 bricks on his head. And now, barefoot, very important, can walk and not fall. So that's pretty insane, right? But that's someone who, though they may not be aware of the fact, they are aware of where their AO joint is, they are fully aware of where their AO joint is. So this is something we want as a conductor and as a musician and, you know, in life in general. How many of you have gotten in the car after teaching all day and you have to put the mirror down? Anybody? Yeah. Next time, instead of having to put the mirror down, go, I have an AO joint. And $10 says your mirror's in the right place. But we've gotten ourselves to here. And so we adjust our life to here. And then you get in the car the next morning, and what do you have to do? Put the mirror back up again. Because you've relaxed those muscles. We want to avoid adjusting and instead balance. Up and over. This is a gesture Matt can probably remember if he remembers me conducting. I have this gesture all the time in conducting. And that is when I see people get to this place, up and over. And suddenly they release and their AO joints are balanced and they're playing in tune. They have longer phrases. It's amazing. Teach them that. Teach them that, hey, when I do this, this is what's happening. And it's like, you know, Pavlov's dog. You're going to train them that they see this and they go, oh, I don't need to be uncomfortable. It's really quite brilliant. Because as you know, as conductors, all we do is manipulate people. It's a good thing. We do it for the good of the order, but we're making sometimes hundreds of people do what we want them to do. So if we're doing harm to a lot of people. So we want to avoid that. Okay, up and over. Put that in your gesture somewhere. It'll do wonders. Let's visit our hip joints. So I'm going to invite you to stand up with me again. And I'm going to ask you to, if I can stay on the screen with you, that would be amazing. But if not, totally understand. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to ask you to put your hands on your hips. And I'm going to come look at you. Hands on your hips. Hands on your hips. What a weird workshop, right? I'm like, hey, creeper. Okay, hands on your hips. Great, 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 great. Okay, so I'm going to invite you to take a nice big breath and release. Once again, and release. And now I'm going to invite you to go ahead and touch the floor. And it's okay if you can't touch the floor, but bend over like you're going to touch your toes. And be aware of where the tips of your fingers are in relationship to the floor. And when you're ready, come on and roll up and unmute yourself and tell me where your fingers were in relationship to the floor. We're going to be back up again standing in a second, so just so FYI.
My ankles.
They were at your ankles. Okay, thanks, Matt. Anyone else?
On the floor.
On the floor? Great. Anyone else?
With bent knees, I could touch the floor.
Okay, with bent knees, touch the floor. Good. Anybody else?
Mine were about an inch above my toes.
Inch above your toes. Wonderful. Okay, let's go back. Many of you are putting your hands, go ahead and stand up. You're putting your hands on what we actually, it's not your hip joints. It's called your iliac crest. So this is right here is where you're putting your hands. There is no joint here. So when you try and bend from this place, all you're doing is having movement in your spine, but you can't have full movement. So where's your hip joint? Your hip joints, oh, let me get my little skeleton. My dog just ate the hand off my little skeleton, so my apologies. And then chewed his fingers up, as you can see. So your hip joint, here's your iliac crest. Your hip joint is down and in. So how do we find that? Because it's in the middle of our body. So how do we find that? Well, this is how we find it. Your hip joint is the place where your hip meets your torso, or your leg meets your torso. So if you go sideways, forward, right? Zoop, zoop, zoop. And you're going to find a bone sticking out right here. This right here. And it's going to be a little bit tender probably. And you know, some of us have more flesh than others. That's okay. Take up your space. Poke through that flesh and find that bone. That's not your hip. This is called your greater trochanter. Your hip joint is in and up from there. Okay. So how do we do that? Well, you know that rotation. There's your hip joint. It's all the way in here. Or if you just wiggle this way, you can find your hip joint. All right, so now we have a new location for our hip joints as opposed to our hips, because they're not hips, they're hips joints, right? Go ahead and take a nice big breath with your newfound hip joints. Go ahead and put your hands back on your iliac crest and take a big breath and release. Do you notice a difference? Where can you get more air in? Yeah, when you're in the right place. Okay, now watch this. This is when they call me McGonagall. Find your new hip joints once again. And go ahead and touch the floor. Anyone want to unmute and tell me where your fingers are now?
On the floor.
On the floor. So you got down another 1.5 inches. Way to go, Mrs. Smith. Anybody else?
I was
Did you all
in the same
notice?
spot.
You were in the same spot? Okay. Anybody else notice that they were lower than before? Great. The biggest thing there is that when you map your hips correctly, you can breathe. That's huge for musicians, regardless of what your instrument is. So we want to teach our students correct anatomy so that they can breathe. All right, hip joints. They are sideways facing joints. Many people map them as forward facing joints. If they were forward, we would not be able to move our legs to the side. So remember, they're sideways facing. Arms are sideways, hip joints are sideways, ears are sideways. When we are standing, the weight delivery comes down through the lumbar spine, in through, this is what we call our pelvic bowl, in through the bowl of the pelvis, and then down through our femurs or into our sits bones when we're sitting, okay? This is really important for sitting in rehearsals all the time because it's very common for people to say, sit on the edge of the chair. Well, that may not be the right place to sit for everyone. So here's an example. I'm 5'9". I'm sitting on a piano bench. This is going to be loud. Sorry. Sorry. Can you see where I'm sitting? If I sit on the edge of my chair, my feet have to go underneath in order for me to balance. I can't breathe. So I have to sit actually to the back of my chair because my legs are so long. So let's avoid telling everybody that they are generically one size and this is where they need to sit or stand to be in balance. What we want to do is find the correct joints and find balance according to each person. Does that make sense? Great. There's no one size fits all. So we just visited our sitting bones right here. Oops. So here's our sits bones. Can you see them? And the best way to find them, you know, my yoga teacher always says, move the flesh. So move the flesh. You can feel them under your butt. Move the flesh around and find those sits bones. Instead of telling our students, sit on the front of your chair, tell them to find their sits bones. There'll be a few giggles the first few times. You can call them sitting bones. But once we get over the hurdle, they're actually good to go. Right here, you can see this is the tail end of your spine, your coccyx, your sacrum. Here's your lumbar spine. This is really important. Your hip joints are actually always above your knee. Many of you will say, what are you talking about? There's my knee up there. It's not your knee joint. We're about to visit there. The weight delivery of the torso, including the pelvis, is through the sits bones. So it's like a beautiful cathedral, right? The arch of a cathedral. We want it to come all the way through the pelvic bowl. So if we palpate, you just found your greater trochanter. Find that again. Remember, that's that bone that sticks out. All right. And then if you can go like zoop, 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 slide your, I'm sliding my legs like this to the side, you can find where those sits bones are. If we are on our sits bones, we don't feel the need to slouch and we don't feel the need to do that back row baritone, you know, where we curve our lumbar spine. Once you're on your sits bones, your AO joint, your hips, your hip joints, then you're good to go. So let's take a look at Bony Bob here. We have our AO joint right down to our hip joints. Beautiful line. I always tell my students and my children I gave birth to, I don't call my students my children, head over heart over hips. Head over heart over hips. And the second one of those is offline, head over heart over hips. And you can find a beautiful balance and you can breathe. So this is our lumbar spine. It's these last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what we like to call our lower back.
Of course, this is true throughout the spine. We want to stay aware of the other curves too, the thoracic, the lumbar, and even the curve of the sacrum, and we want to recognize their importance. Also, please notice that each vertebra is bigger than the one above it, because each vertebra must bear and deliver more weight.
So to allow ourselves time for questions, I'm going to tell you how to get your hands on all these videos after the fact, but I'm just going to show you again. Remember, this is a me-sized spine. There are a few really important things here. This is not a bad spine. This is a really healthy spine. You'll notice the curve of the spine. The spine is not straight. Many of us have been told as musicians, straight back. Many of us have been told to go against a wall to stand up straight. The spine is not straight. The spine is like a core of an apple, and the body and the lungs, that's a whole other story. Breathing blew my mind. Wrap around the apple, right? Wrap around the core of the spine. Check out the size of this first vertebrae, like right here. Can you see it? Pretty small. Look at the size, pardon me, hand up through the pelvis, but it's the best way to do it. Look at the size of the bottom vertebrae. So each one gets progressively bigger as we go down, right? And this is the weight bearing. This is not the weight bearing part of the spine. So when we tell students to stand up straight, they're trying to do this, which the spine doesn't naturally do. The other thing we tell students, which is very common, is your head, it's like a string. Let's avoid it's like a. It's not. Your head is not on a string. It's not like a balloon. It's not. You have an AO joint. Let's use it properly, right? Even with young children, there's a great text teaching young children body mapping. If we teach them this from the beginning, we don't need to use it's like a, or let the butterflies open up your lungs. Breathe into your bellies. Oh, that one kills me. You can't breathe into your bellies. You don't eat with your lungs. You don't breathe into your bellies. Very, very different things, okay? So let's look at that weight delivery. The weight delivery comes down through into our lumbar spine, into our hip joints, and down through. Now, right here, you're gonna see the inside of this person's head and neck. Here's the, oh my goodness, how did I just forget the name of this bone? It'll come to me, sorry. Here's the spine, here's the mandible, all right, here's the base of the skull, here's the AO joint. And you're gonna see the movement that they're doing down here, and you can feel free to mirror that movement and see if you map it in the same place. Hyoid bone, sorry, that's the hyoid bone that anchors the tongue. Feel free to move with them. So here's the front, here's the back. Okay, we're gonna skip forward a little bit. This is tipping side to side. So you can see each vertebra moves with the other one. It's not one movement. Now I hope I'm in the right place for you to see the no movement. Fingers crossed. There we go. There's where the no movement happens, as opposed to where the yes movement happens. Two very different places. Okay. Let's visit our knees. So what I've done here, all of these pictures are copyright of, they're done by medical illustrators, but they're copyright of the Body Mapping Association. So this is our top big leg bone, right up in our thigh, and then we have two bones in our bottom, or where our calf is. And we won't get into details about the names of the bones for now. I just popped the knee calf off right here. So much like the AO joint, we have bumps on the top knee or the top bone, and then divots on the bottom. Okay. So let's visit that. Well, the states in the knee. I invite you to stand up and feel these, because these are critical for performing musicians. When we lock our knees, we all know what happens. So we have that locked knee, we have a bent knee, and be aware of what's happening to your entire body when you're doing this. So for me, when I lock my knees, my pelvis comes forward, my belly juts out, I squeeze my butt, I pull my shoulders back, and my chin comes forward, because otherwise I'm gonna tip over. And when I bend my knee, my butt goes back, my toes come off the ground, right? My head comes forward, because you have to find that balance. So what you see is this plumb line here, which is the weight delivery. When we have a locked knee, we're actually having to hold, co-contract our muscles in our legs the whole time to keep us upright, because our bony structure can't do it. The weight is coming in through the muscle. When we're balanced, the weight is coming through the bony structure. And when we bend, well, we're on our way somewhere. So that's a little bit different. So let's look at the lateral view. Here's that greater trochanter that you touched. Up and in is that ball and socket hip joint, right? Which is different than a hinge joint. Like our knee is a hinge joint, this is a ball and socket joint. Here we have our knee going down, two bones in the bottom, and then into our foot and our ankle. Now, let's look at this bent knee. Oops. I'm actually going to skip this video, so we have time for questions. So there's three ways for you to bend the knee. Let's check it out. We can roll. And this is where, without connective tissue, the thigh bone can actually roll across the top of the surface of the tibia, just like a ball rolling across the floor. But luckily, we have connective tissue that stops that from happening. So what's connective tissue? Ligaments, tendons, muscles, there's all kinds of stuff in there to stop that from happening so that we have the right knee motion. This is not a leg. I know that, trust me, but I don't want to put my knee all the way up here. That would just be awkward. Okay. Then we have the rolling on a constant point in contact with the tibia. We don't want this. And the problem is the thigh bone, just like with our tires in a car, right? We have to get our tires rotated because otherwise they'll wear thin in one place. This is what's going to happen with your knee. Your knee is going to grind down in one part of the bone. The issue is connective tissue does not stop this from happening. So if we teach our body to walk that way, we're actually damaging the joint, damaging the knee, because we've mismapped our knee. What we want is a rolling and gliding. So the thigh bone rolls and glides across the top of the tibia, And this is constantly reestablishing a new contact point. So this is really important for things like marching band or things like show choir, right? Whenever we're moving, we want to make sure that those knees are doing the right thing. This allows the body weight to come through the bony structure and not forward into the knee, which then forces us to lock our knee. So check this out. Many people go ahead and palpate your knee. That means give your knee a massage. Best part of the show. Enjoy it. Okay. How many of you are rubbing right here? On your knee, right here? Anybody rubbing on the front? Or anybody rubbing on the back? Where are you rubbing? On the back? Some are rubbing on the back. Some of you don't want to admit. Okay, so if we are rubbing here or our kneecap, that is not the joint. The joint is down and behind. So when we say, oh, my knee hurts. No, that's not your knee. Here's your knee, all the way back here. All right, take a look at this movement. Rolling and gliding. Look at the movement of the kneecap. Rolling and gliding. That's what we want. Okay, let's visit the ankle joints. So if we look at the ankle joint, we have that bone that sticks out right there. Can you all find that on yourselves? Ankle, right? That's our ankle. I roll over on my ankle. That's not our ankle. Don't. All right, so let's talk about our ankle. Here, I'm going to show you. That's part of our ankle joint. I'm going to raise my desk. Best investment I ever made was a desk that moves. FYI, if you ever have to teach virtually, again, best investment. Okay, so what we're poking at when we do that is right here. That's a solid bone. The ankle is in here. So you can see the place where that bone meets the foot is part of the ankle, but that's not our ankle. So here we have another mismapping. So we have an uneven distribution of weight because we're putting the weight here. And when we put the weight there, instead of it being balanced, we roll out or we roll in because we've mismapped where that ankle actually is. Let's take a look at the foot. I shouldn't have sat down. All right, oops. The foot has multiple arches. Okay, we're gonna check these out. So we have a arch, on the inside and at the instep and on the outside. Many of us perceive the arch as that one place in a Birkenstock where the footbed is raised. It's not the only place we have an arch. Between the inside and the outside, there's arches in here. Across the balls of the feet, there's another arch. And the toes are not part of the arch. All right, stand up with me again. Check this out. Interactive webinar. Thank you all so much for keeping your cameras on. If you can go barefoot, go for it. If you can't, totally understand. All right, we're gonna find a place where our toes are free. So I want you to pretend this is my foot. That's the ball of my big foot. There's the ball of my pinky, and there's my heel. So this is a tripod, okay? So these are my toes. We want free toes. So go ahead and find that tripod, and your toes should wiggle. Can you all wiggle your toes freely? Good. Bring your weight forward, just an inch. Wiggle your toes. Can you do it? No. All right, bring your weight back on your heels. Wiggle your toes. Can you do it? No. So the problem we have here is when we use our toes to stand, and I'm going to encourage you to stay standing. Go ahead and grip the floor with your toes and take a nice breath. And release. Now release your toes and take a nice breath. And release. Anybody notice a difference in that breath? Yeah. So our toes really affect the way we breathe, which sounds insane. I get that. But think about toes when they're squished into pointy-toed high heels or into marching band shiny shoes, or, right, all of these things affect, or someone leaning forward and their toes are gripping. Toes should always be free, and they're never used for balance. The only reason we have toes is to propel us forward. That's the only reason. So if you notice your toes are gripping, you're not balanced. Find that balance again. And that's a great way to ask your students, where are your toes? And they'll go, oh, my toes. Wiggle your piggies. If you can set your piggies free like they do on Sesame Street, you're good to go. When using the arches correctly, toes are free. So the weight delivery comes down the front of the leg or the big bone and into the arch, just like the arch of the pelvic bowl. Here's that point where we perceive our ankle, we call it a mismapping of our ankle, and here's the actual ankle joint. I'm going to skip forward a little bit so you can see. Here we are. There's that ankle joint is up in here. See that? So it's in a very different place, which for movement as musicians is the key. We need to understand where those ankles are. My favorite part, arms. You ready for this? Go ahead and palpate. Arms are at your sides. So this is me lying flat on my back without anything but bones. All right. Here's my spine. Here's my shoulder blades. Here's my rib cage. Y'all understand? And they chop my head off. Okay. So we're looking down through my chest cavity. Okay. How many of us have heard, get your shoulders back? Or have said that? I said that when I was younger. I don't say it anymore. Get your shoulders back. Shoulders should never be back. Shoulders should be balanced. Balanced at the sides. They can go back, but that should not be where they stay. A place of balance in the arms is a place of neutrality, okay? It's not something you find and hold, but it's a relationship. So they can come forward, they can go back, and they can move around. And once we have that freedom, we have freedom to breathe, and we have freedom to move, we have freedom to conduct. Where is your arm attached to your body? Go ahead, palpate and show me where your arm is attached to your body. Don't be afraid to be wrong. Being wrong is how we learn. And you get a little massage out of it. So that's, it's a win-win, right? Wonderful. All right, I see a lot of you in here. So I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and swim. You are now Michael Phelps. Swim, French stroke, breaststroke, freestyle, whatever you want to do. Back. Because we know that this is where our arm, we're all conductors. Go ahead and conduct. This is where our arm is attached to our body. Play a bow. This is where our arm is attached to our body, right? This is not where our arm is attached to our body. Not even close. So you're going to palpate with me and you're going to go, you can see mine are really bumpy. This is called our sternoclavicular joint, your sternum and your clavicle. This is the only place where the arm is attached to our torso. Now go ahead and swim. Anyone notice a bigger movement? Go ahead and conduct. So much more freedom. So when we're trying to play and we think the arm is attached here, what do? We lock and we freeze. It affects our breath. It affects our range of motion in our fingers. It affects everything. I know some of you are like, maybe that's where her arm is attached to her body. That's not where my arm is attached to my body. Totally true. You too have an arm attached to your body right here. Take a look. Your sternum, right? Sternoclavicular joint. Now, let me say, how am I doing for time? 10 minutes. 4:30, right? I have till 4:30. Is that correct? Okay, excellent. There's a bunch of muscles and connective tissue and fascia and ligaments and all that jazz to make sure this doesn't go and like fall off, right? But the joint, the place where the movement happens in the bony structure is right here. It's also not an elevator. It doesn't do this. Zoop, zoop. It does this. Zoop, 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 right? So up to your ears and down, back and forward. Changes our breath, changes our motion, changes our swim stroke, but that's, again, another day. We call this humeroscapular rhythm. This is your scapula, your shoulder blade. Okay, that's this thing right here. And then your humerus, that's your big bone up here. So humeroscapular rhythm. What many of us do is we have humerus movement, but we don't include our scapula because we've mapped our arm as stopping here. Anybody have issues in their hands or arms after conducting for a long day? Shoulders, neck, tired, everything here. That's from mismapping where that arm is attached. So we're aiming for humeroscapular rhythm. Watch this video. Same goes for playing an instrument. Humerus, scapula. There's always movement together. If we freeze that, we have frozen shoulder. We can't get the same range of motion. We end up pulling down and collapsing our rib cage. So you'll find a lot more freedom when you understand that all of these are connected. Try conducting with this newfound knowledge while you're watching that movement. The scapula should move. The movement happens here. The scapula wraps around the shoulder blade. The shoulder blade wraps around the rib cage, allows freedom, allows movement, allows breath. Yeah. Okay. So the 6 places of balance that we visited. First one's that AO joint. Try and find that while we scan them here today. Next was our arm structure. Ooh, huge. Sideways arms. Lumbar spine. Weight bearing all the way down through. Hip joints. Never reference it again as hands on your hips. If you want to be anatomically correct, tell them to put their hands on their iliac crest. Okay? You're never going to do that. So just don't say hands on your hips anymore. Knees. Remember where your knees are. This is not your knee. Don't go by the skin. Go by the joint. Ankles. Don't go by the pointy part of that bone. Go by your ankle. And with that, we have 7 minutes left for questions. Any questions or comments or anything, I'll do what I can to help.
Nice job, Nicole. I was going to give you the 5-minute warning, but I don't have to. All right, guys, don't be shy. This is your chance.
Dr. Andrews, you said we're going to have access to this?
Actually, this is recorded and
Okay.
it takes me about a week to do the closed captioning. It'll be up on our Arts Webinars page, so you can find it there, so you can review it.
I do want to share a few things because a lot of times people will ask, where can I get more information about this? It's usually right here, but I don't know where I'll find that after. Okay, so this is one that's like super cheap. I think it's like $10 on Amazon. And it's called The Structures and Movement of Breathing. And it's actually a primer for choirs and courses, but I found out about this from our tuba instructor, from Scott Sutherland. Because he was reading this like a Bible before he started doing anything, before we even met. And this is a great book which shares a lot of the pictures I shared with you today. And they're anatomically correct, and it's in the vernacular. So your students can understand it, you can understand it. Because if you don't want the vernacular, as we say. So for singers, wait, let me go here first. So this is what every musician needs to know about the body. So if we were to do the 2-day workshops with you, we would go through this book in detail. And this is a great book. You know, it's kind of like the coloring book, right? Where you can look through everything and you can see the pictures and step by step. But then this kind of skims the surface depending on your instrument. So this is what every singer needs to know about the body. Really detailed, anatomical. We're talking like, you know, MD kind of level information. And for most, I don't know if I have them all here with me. Yeah. So here's what every violinist needs to know about the body. So like there's almost a book for every instrument. This is one of my body mapping teachers. She's actually also from Newfoundland, which is just a fluke. But she is the body mapping educator for the New York Phil, right? So we're kind of all over the place, but there's some great resources out there if you want them. Those are a little more expensive. This one is, like I said, I think it's $10 on Amazon. But the video that I was showing you little bits about I can't find it. It's called What Every Musician Needs to Know About the Body. And I can, Louisa, I can send you links to all of this stuff as well,
Okay,
so that you can share it. But this is one that you may really want to check out. And this is Teaching Body Mapping to Children. And this is a great text. It shares success stories. It's for instrumental. This is written by Jennifer Johnson, the string book author as well. She taught it before she wrote the book, meaning teaching children before she wrote the book to see what worked and what didn't work. So this is great from the view of a string professor, as well as she worked with a choir when developing this as well. So with both an orchestra and a choir. So those are just some resources that you can look at. And then there's body mapping teachers, just the same as there's AT, which is Alexander Technique. You do somatic education the same way we do lessons, right? You go to a voice teacher, you go to a body mapping teacher. So it's the same idea, and they're all over the place. There's quite a few actually in California that you can access. And sometimes people want to, if I'm a trumpet player, I want to go to a body mapping educator who's a trumpet player so that they can find similar issues that you may or may not have, if you will.
Okay, and I was just going to pipe in. Jessica, can you put the RCLE VAPA Arts Webinars link in the chat, please?
Just want to say thank you. That was great. I've had some body mapping before, and I want to advocate for that. I call it the little purple book.
Yeah, the choral.
The choral book is really so worth all $7 or
$10. Yeah, I don't even think it's 10 actually. You're right.
Yeah, no, and I love seeing. I use that in my advanced choral conducting class, and I love. And I was just thinking about the scapula. I find that to be the one. If there's one thing that I think helps their conducting is having that awareness, and we have to constantly reinforce that. Because
absolutely,
just being so restricted. So I appreciate that, and I would love to be able to. I love that visual. I would love to be able to. If I don't know if you can share that, seeing the anatomy of that.
Actually, that's not even a body mapping one. I found that online. I think that's from an MD site. There's a lot of great videos that are done. Some are done with cadavers, which is really incredible. But again, we're not going to share most of that with young children for sure. I share it with my college students, but I have to put a disclaimer out in advance. But if you Google, just make sure you're looking at medical ones, because there's a lot out there that's not very good as well. But yeah, that humeroscapular rhythm. If you Google humeroscapular rhythm, you'll see that. Yeah, that's a great image, especially for conductors. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it is we don't see it, right? You don't see internally. So when you see it there and you go, oh, holy cow, that's totally where my arm is moving. But if we don't map the joint, the map will always prevail. And what blew my mind as a musician was, how do I have 4 degrees in music and no one told me where my arm was attached to my freaking body? Like, that's not okay. You find me an athlete who doesn't know where their arm is attached to their body, right? Even if they didn't retain the information, they were told the information at some point. So as musicians, we're micro movers. Why are we not taught that? And actually NASM, which is the National Association of Accreditation for, there's too many letters in there, but it's the accreditation for the schools of music. They now require musculoskeletal health. So like the students at the U of R are required to take instruction in somatic education, which is very exciting. And so many of our injuries can just be avoided. We actually cause them ourselves, and such repetitive motion. String players and pianists, when we co-contract, boom, tendonitis is gone. Instead of taking drugs and having to go through therapy and we're just using both muscles at the same time, and they're counteracting each other, So.
Well, as we wrap up, I just want to let you know that my assistant Jessica will be sending you out a survey. If you'd be kind enough to spend a few minutes filling that out, that really directs programming. So if you give feedback, then we will pass that along to Dr. Andrews. That's a nice way of you being able to communicate, and also letting me know if this is worthwhile. Would you like to see this in a longer workshop, and so on. So that directs programming for next year. So your feedback is incredibly important to shaping future programs. So I just want to thank Nicole. If you want to shout out your email address, Nicole,
sure.
that would be helpful.
If I can spell my name, which I can't. Okay. There you go. Yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any questions, or if you want me to set you up with body mapping lessons or with a body mapping educator anywhere. We can help you out.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for such a wonderful afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Andrews. It was wonderful to be
Thank
with
you
and learn. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Nice to meet you all. Take care. Stay safe.